Assassin's Creed 2 is seen as Ubisoft's magnum opus. Unity is the troubled child who can do nothing right, even with all their potential. But now, 8 years on from Unity's release, they are much closer than we initially thought. I for one think Unity is better. Not just in some areas, but most of them. Let's start off by giving the OG Assassin's Creed a win. Ezio is one of the best video game protagonists ever. Unlike other great leads, he can't be described in one way because he starts off as a lovable goof, ends up a master assassin, and goes through every phase in between right in front of our eyes through the trilogy. Most of that growth takes place in Assassin's Creed 2. Arno is definitely an Ezio wannabe or a major inspiration for the character at the least. I mean, it is Ubisoft. If something works, they're gonna run it until it doesn't. Even the biggest Unity fans can't deny that Ubisoft tried to recapture Ezio's magic, and to a certain degree they did. Sure, he isn't Ezio or Bayek, but he is much better than some of the other protagonists in the series. This young, kind of goofy man who slowly turns into this assassin, enduring one tragedy after the next. That sentence is 100% applicable to both of them, as is many of their traits. Of course, Unity has a near perfect parkour system, we will get into that, but combat is often overlooked. The series had become a button mashing counterfest. Unity changed that. Combat before Unity was awful, and combat after Unity was also somewhat awful with Syndicate and even with the huge bloated map trilogy. Combat is button mashing against bullet sponges to a degree. But Unity had this awesome system that made you feel like a master assassin when you took the stealth route. 1v1 fights are realistic, fun, they are easy if you pay attention, but you still can't wing it, especially if you're going up against a higher level enemy. I never felt like rushing through combat section no matter the kind of situation. If you tried to go against multiple enemies at once, you had very little chance. Enemies will shoot you quite easily even if you're a master swordsman. You were rewarded for playing like an assassin with these awesome kill animations while still being challenging and having consequences when you play without thinking. This level of challenge wasn't seen since the very first Assassin's Creed. Granted, some of Assassin's Creed 1's challenge was just because of how clunky the game was, but regardless, that brought a level of immersion that mindless counterattacks just don't. Assassin's Creed 2 had that same problem. Combat looked cool. I mean, now in 2022, hidden blades and rooftop kill animations and stuff have lost their initial appeal, but AC2 was just the second game. I remember just walking around one-shotting enemies just because of how great it looked. Let me tell you, I haven't done that in a long time. Assassin's Creed 2 had awesome looking mechanics, but Unity has awesome looking combat, plus it made you think, which in the long run keeps you engaged. No game before or since has had a better parkour system than Unity. You can move up, down, across, you can manually perform unsafe jumps, which seems simple, but it gives the player so much more freedom. But it's not just that, the amount of animations the game has is incredible. Arno doesn't just climb buildings, you can package X, side hop, he spins to create extra momentum. Sure, parkour has a steep learning curve and the game certainly doesn't try to teach you the various mechanics. Many players might just get through the game with the most basic elements. It's definitely not perfect. Entering a gigantic window is near impossible here. If you press the right button with a wrong camera angle, Arno will do the opposite of what you want. Sometimes you can do everything right, but the bugginess and clunkiness of the game gets in the way. But nonetheless, it was beautiful, complicated and useful. You could fail at tackling someone and fall on the ground. You need to time everything properly. The game is filled with things like that. Running around Paris is a great element in itself. Parkour isn't there for just traversal, but it's great on its own too. The only time and place that can compete with Paris during the French Revolution is probably Renaissance Italy. The setting in both games is a highlight. Ubisoft went above and beyond to not only create something like Paris, but Paris itself during the French Revolution. This doesn't mean much to people who haven't been there and can't compare it, but everyone can admire the architecture of one of the prettiest cities in the world. Game world and world design is one aspect where both games are neck and neck. Maybe Unity is ahead slightly because of technical advancements, but it is mostly personal preference. I remember during the lead up to Unity, we were told the map was the same size as the Frontier section in Assassin's Creed 3. Throughout the many playthroughs of Unity, there wasn't one moment where I felt the map was small. It's because of how dense the world is. Not only the population, but also buildings with interiors. Sure, the game takes you to the same location multiple times on occasion, but it felt like every other building had a totally detailed interior. Some of them felt similar, and knowing Ubisoft, they probably did copy paste some rooms, but they did it somewhat well because for the first 10 hours you aren't really sure. Unity is one of the best examples of size not mattering. Valhalla and Odyssey have gigantic maps, but the world will start feeling stale much sooner, at least it did for me. Assassin's Creed 2 goes with the same formula, with a map even slightly smaller than Unity. Exploring is still a boatload of fun, you run into some interesting things. Italy is just beautiful, not only in how it looks but how it feels as well. None of us were there in Italy in the 15th century, but the game feels like what it would have been like. Unity does the same with Paris. The game even takes you to 1944 to show you what a bad idea an Assassin's Creed during World War II would be. But even that section of the game is beautiful in a horrifying way. Not a single world in the series has immersed me to the level Paris in Unity has. I could run around doing nothing and still have fun, partly because of Paris and partly because of the parkour system in place. Everyone says graphics don't matter, and yeah, in most games visuals aren't the make or break factor, but Unity's graphics did help the game stay relevant even now, 8 years later. I seriously have no idea how Ubisoft managed to make a game this stunning in 2014 for a base PS4 and Xbox One. The lighting just looks unreal. It looks like a graphics mod, but actually good. Combat is somewhat deep, yeah, you can get away with button mashing, but against multiple enemies it is a challenge. Arno is a good enough protagonist, he did learn from the best, side characters are alright, the story isn't inspiring in any way, but it's fine. All those things combined make Assassin's Creed Unity better than Assassin's Creed 2, which in itself is a great game.